not quite that loud. And the microphone is not working. My name is Bill Davies.
Bring the podium up a little. We can hear you better.
Is that all right if we move the podium up? Was that a no or a yes?
Yeah, come on up.
Bring it right up this road.
You're supposed to come on down.
How's that? Thank you, Robin.
Not afraid.
Good morning. My name is Bill Davies, the moderator for this year's series of legislative breakfasts, which are hosted by the Vermont North Country Chamber of Commerce. And in behalf of the North Country Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to welcome everyone this morning. I'm very pleased this morning to recognize Karen Gary, who's NVDA's Economic Development Specialist, who assists in organizing these breakfasts, and who, I must say, has done an extra special job today. Also like to welcome Dan Pellerin, who is the Vice Chair of the Chamber, and who is in training so that next year he will do just as good a job as Karen does this year. And again, thank you, Dan and Karen. If there's anyone here this morning who does not receive email notification of these breakfasts, please make sure that either Karen or Dan have your email address before departing this morning, and you will be added to the list. Today's breakfast is sponsored by the Orleans County Board of Realtors. And I'd like to call upon Peter Fina, who is the Government Affairs Director of the county's Board of Realtors, to say just a few words. Peter?
Thank you, Bill. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the breakfast. We appreciate the turnout this morning. Our legislators, I'm sure, will be talking about some interesting topics, at least some topics that we as realtors find interesting, and hope that you all bring your questions forward to our legislators so that they can get our feedback. Again, thank you for showing up this morning, and I'll turn the floor back over to Bill.
Thank you very much, Peter. Again, I'm sure everyone joins in me in expressing our appreciation to the Orleans County Board of Realtors for sponsoring this breakfast. And for those of you who are not aware of what the word sponsored means, that means pays for. No need to deposit your $5 this breakfast because of the generosity of the Board of Realtors. And again, we extend our appreciation for the hospitality extended to us by the management and staff here at the Eastside Restaurant. This morning, Terry DeFazio is again videotaping these proceedings for later broadcast on Channel 15. And if I'm guessing correctly, today's breakfast will be broadcast tonight at 8 p.m. as well as again on Wednesday at 9 a.m. In addition, we're very pleased to have the print media represented again this morning by Robin Smith from The Record and Ed Barber from the Newport Daily Express. Thank you, Terry, Robin, and Ed for making these proceedings observable by the folks who aren't able to be here this morning. We do have some special guests here this morning, and I'd like to extend a special welcome to the members of Irene Digest's Coventry Village School Green Team, who's seated here. It's always it's always a special pleasure to have a younger generation present, because I think, as we know, the age of citizen participation in many respects seems to be diminishing, and we are very much encouraged when we do see some young folks who are participating. As a result, we are going to change our format just a little bit. Once we open the floor to questions and comments from the audience, the first three folks that are going to be recognized are our special guests from Coventry. We are expecting momentarily the appearance of Governor Stott, but I haven't seen that he has arrived yet, so I'll just quickly reiterate what our normal format is. And our normal format is to have one senator and two representatives as our special guests. And the selected senator and representatives are each given the opportunity to make a 10-minute or so presentation as to the issues that they're dealing with this year in Montpelier. And also the issues that they think will be coming up, or that they hope will be coming up. And once we've heard from the legislators and the governor, we will open the floor to questions and comments from you, the citizens of Orleans County. Again, today's format is a little bit different because we focus generally on the issues facing the legislature. Well, today, with the expected arrival of the governor, we'll also be expanding that to issues that you believe that the governor's office or the governor's administration should be dealing with. So that does broaden it. And my vision in this room isn't quite what it could be. Is Senator Starr present?
No, he won't be able to make it. He asked if I could come in his place.
Okay. Well, Senator Rodgers, thank you for identifying yourself. And
thought that's why there was such a good turnout. Everybody heard I was coming.
Well, Senator Rodgers, would you please tell us what's happening in the Senate?
Good morning, all. Good morning, Bill. Yeah, Senator Starr had an appointment today, so couldn't make it. Asked me if I could come. Great to see some young folks here. We love seeing young folks get involved. I hope you'll continue to stay involved and keep track of what's going on in your community and take part in it. So recently in the Senate, we just passed a bill that requires all contractors to register with the state. I opposed the bill and had lots of questions for the committee that was proposing it. I think this is just another fee and another hurdle for Vermonters that's going to add to the cost of doing construction. What's happened over the years, there's some bad contractors out there that have defrauded people and done poor work, and my suggestion was if there's bad contractors out there, make a list of bad contractors so people can access it. As many of you know, I've been in the construction business since I was in my early 20s, and I have people that literally leave a blank check on the table for me when I come and do work for them. I have customers who I've worked for years who don't even ask me for an estimate. They say, John, could you come and take a look at this project? When can you do it? Because we've developed that relationship, and people have the ability already to ask for references, and people also have the ability currently to ask for a contract. If you ask a contractor for a contractor and they say, no way, I would say that's a red flag and you should do a little bit more homework. But I just feel it's another place where Vermont's becoming the nanny state. It used to be Vermonters were very independent, and more there are fewer and fewer things that you can do in Vermont without paying a fee and asking the bureaucrat for permission. And I think that's a disturbing way for this state to go. My Committee on Natural Resources and Energy did pass a plastic bag ban, which I think is a good step forward. It's going to be a learning experience and a bit inconvenient for all of us, I think. We've had reusable bags for years, but I, as many of you, sometimes forget the reusable bags in the other car or get in the store and forget them in the car. So Sounds like my phone, but it isn't. So you will be able to still purchase paper bags, but paper bags do come with their own problems. You know, they're not perfect for the environment either. And one of the things that I fought against on the floor, Senator Sorokin was worried about poor people. We're all worried about poor people not being able to afford a 10-cent paper bag. So he put in an amendment that would drop the fee from 10 cents to 5 cents. In states that have done the 5 cents, it hasn't been enough money to change people's behavior. They just switch from plastic to paper, and then we have a paper problem. If you do the math, if somebody has to pay 10 cents for a bag and uses a few bags a week, it ends up being $10 to $15 a year they're spending on those paper bags. $10 to $15 would buy people reusable bags that would last them for many years. So if we're really looking out for people who don't have a lot of disposable income, we should be encouraging them to buy the bags that will last a long, long time. It's the best value, and many of the stores have programs that practically give the bags away. I think some of them actually do give them away, but they're usually very low cost, and we really need to change the way we function around our solid waste. One of the big things that we need to do, and this is a bit more of a hurdle, but is to get manufacturers to package stuff better with less packaging that ends up in the landfill, because a huge amount of that plastic that things are encased in is not recyclable. And as many of you have heard, we've got a lot of problems with our recycling system right now. Currently, there's no market for glass. I just found out within the last couple weeks that, I believe it was last year, possibly the year before, Chittenden County Solid Waste District just got caught for illegally dumping a huge amount of glass. Now, it wasn't that where they dumped it was necessarily bad, because glass is inert and they put it in an old landfill. The point is, they were telling the state that they were recycling the stuff and they were dumping it. Now, we in this area are trucking glass all the way down to the MRF in Chittenden County, where it gets source separated. Some of it contaminates the paper and the plastic products that are going to recycle, making them less valuable. Then they put that glass through a crusher, then it sits there in a pile or it gets illegally dumped. Now, from my perspective, we just wasted a huge amount of time, energy, and resources to truck that stuff down there for them to dump it in a landfill. We've got a landfill right here, and the most economical way to deal with the Northeast Kingdom's glass is to let them use it here, because that glass could be used for covering, it could be used for road base and building right here, saving this whole area a ton of money and cutting down on carbon emissions. So we still have a lot of issues around solid waste that I've been pushing on. Am I supposed to yield to the governor, since he's probably on a shorter schedule?
We'll let you finish, because you are not Senator Scarr, so we know that you tend to be fairly brief anyway.
Well, if you would like, I could talk slower. Just one more thing I'll touch on that we've been working on in committee is a weatherization bill. I think most of us know that weatherization is one of the best things we can do to our home for long-term savings. The problem is investing in insulation and tightening up your home is quite expensive, and so the payback takes a long time. So a lot of folks just don't do the work, and so we're trying to figure out how to get more weatherization done on the ground. I think there's 3 members of my committee that would like to raise the fuel tax. I'm not one of those. Over the years, as many of you know, we, on every electricity bill, send money to Efficiency Vermont. They can use a tiny sliver of that right now for weatherization. As more and more people put in electric hot water heaters and electric heat pumps and all that stuff, our thermal heat is more and more coming from electric sources. My thought is Why do we need to come up with a new tax? Let's steer a little bit more of that efficiency Vermont, somewhere around $50 million, into more weatherization. It's work that we need to get done. When we do weatherization, we put local contractors to work. That money we know goes around and around the community when we spend it locally. Local contractors that'll now have to register and pay a fee. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Governor Phil Scott. Governor Scott is now serving his second term as governor of the state of Vermont, having served previously as our state's lieutenant governor and as a state senator. Governor Scott.
Well, thank you very much. And I'll give some prepared remarks first, and then we're going to have questions later, or right after this? Later? Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Well, it's great once again to be up here in the Northeast Kingdom. Spring is coming. I saw a glimpse of it in Montpelier this weekend, so the better days are coming. I was up at the Dairy Northeast Conference on Monday, and I thought, I'm not sure that we're going to have spring until July. After seeing the snow that morning, they're still plowing, putting salt down, and so forth. It's had its effect on our budget, the winter budget, but we'll get by and live within our means and look forward to next year. I want to thank all of you, community leaders, legislators who are here for trying to do what you can, working really hard to move this state in the right direction. It's going to take all of us working together in order to do that. It's nice to see some of the kids here as well. Thank you to the Coventry Village School for coming. I look forward to hearing from you as well. We've got a lot of challenges in this state, as we know. You know, it was 2 years ago. On my first day in office, I issued my executive order outlining the strategic goals of my administration. And it was really pretty simple. Grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, protect the most vulnerable. 3 very simple principles which guide us every day in all the policies that we take. We ask ourselves, you know, if we are moving forward with an initiative, does it solve any one of the 3? And if it does, we move forward. If it doesn't, it might be a good idea, put it on the back burner for now, because we have to prioritize. We can't do everything. So we as we work towards these goals, I believe that we'll return Vermont, where all families in all 251 towns and villages are moving up the economic ladder with good paying jobs and a way of life that they can afford. Where our kids have the same opportunity regardless of the school they're going to, and where we do all we can to provide for our neighbors who need us most when they need us most. But in order to change the trajectory we're on, we've got to be honest with ourselves about, again, the challenges that we face. We have a population that's pretty stagnant. In fact, for the first time ever, we're experiencing more deaths than births in this state. Not exactly a recipe for economic success in the future. We saw the impact of this when our bond rating was recently downgraded, in part due to our lack of population growth. This means fewer working age Vermonters. That's really our problem. The sad reality is that there are fewer people working today than there were 10 years ago. Since 2009, our labor force has declined by about 15,000. 15,000 fewer people working or looking for work, which means 15,000 fewer Vermonters available for jobs we know businesses are trying to fill right now. And that also means 15,000 fewer potential taxpayers. To put this in perspective, every county except Chittenden has seen a decline in the number of people working. And while we have a 2.4% unemployment rate, which some would highlight as good news, it doesn't tell the whole story. It only tells half the story. It's the lowest rate since 1976, by the way. It's frustrating because as I travel the state, I can see we have thousands of jobs available throughout the state, but we don't have the people to fill them. In fact, right here in Orleans County, the labor force has declined by about 1,000 workers, about 7% of its labor force since its peak in 2009. This demographic reality is showing up in our schools as well. It's like the canary in the mine shaft. We now have 30,000 fewer K-12 students in our public schools than we had in 1997. That's an average loss of 3 students every day for about 20 years, and that continues today. There's not a single county that hasn't been affected. Since 2004, Orleans County's K-12 enrollment has declined by over 600 students. That's a loss of about 14% of its student population in just 15 years. And Essex County is even worse, at about 42%. These trends not only mean fewer in our workforce and schools, but it also affects our state colleges, who count on Vermont kids. It also means fewer customers at businesses, ratepayers for utilities, fewer available for our volunteer fire departments, and even people running for office. And while this is all happening, we have growing pressure on our state budget due to rising wages and increases in pension payments for state employees and teachers. Our obligation right now, our pension obligation, is about $4 billion right now. And we're paying that off. But it means higher payments every year that we have to build into the budget. So despite having a surplus of about $35 million last year for the first time in a decade, we still began building the budget this year, which the legislature is debating right now, with about a $40 million gap. This is just another reason to face up to our workforce and our demographic challenge. And it should be the top priority of every elected official, regardless of party. On the campaign trail, a business owner said to me, "Governor, we don't need more taxes, we need more taxpayers." And I couldn't agree more when you think about that. When you're in your store, your place of business, you know, that's what you need. You need more customers, you need more revenue. So my agenda continues to be helping more Vermonters find a job or start a career, making sure we're developing policies that help employers and bring more workers and families to Vermont to reverse our demographic challenges. And we must do this while making Vermont more affordable. This starts with making sure we pay attention to the things that Vermont is known for. And you know, it's a great place to live, our quality of life, the health and safety of our communities, and our incredible natural resources. My budget includes investments in each of these areas. I also put together a voluntary paid family leave plan with New Hampshire. Now, this is 2 small states working together, first of its kind in the nation. Our proposal would provide affordable plans for all employers and employees in both states, but it's up to them to join. Now, I know that some believe a totally government-run program funded with a payroll tax of at least $80 million is the way to go. In fact, that's just what the House passed last week. But what I'm asking for is just to give our plan a fair shot, because there are advantages to taking the first step that I'm proposing. First, we can launch more quickly, more affordably, and more reliably than if the state had to create the program from scratch. Second, it makes sure we aren't placing the burden of startup costs or the risks of underfunding and insolvency on taxpayers. We've proven many, many times in state government how difficult it is to protect and replenish accounts like this. When times are tough, legislators and some governors tend to borrow from whichever accounts have money. And third, we're not mandating another cost on our employers and employees for an expense they may not be able to afford. With a voluntary plan, we'll have a workable and scalable program that's administered efficiently by someone else, reduces the risk to taxpayers and state government, and won't adversely affect our economy. To further my point on the difficulty of setting up a government-run program, I think you all remember Vermont Health Connect. Now, Vermont Health Connect turned Vermont on its head because of its IT structure. It's custom-made IT structure. And what happened was, it built this custom-made setup for single-payer healthcare. But the IT section, again, hundreds of millions of dollars were spent on this IT structure that failed for 30,000 people. Now think about what we'd have to do. We have to have another IT, custom-made IT structure built for this paid family leave plan for 300,000 to 450,000 people. Think about what happens then when we fail. And the insurance companies, the outside sources, already do this every day. Even New York doesn't do it on its own. No, Washington, D.C. is just enacting this. They're not going to do it on their own either. So this is something, we need to learn the lessons of the past. And we have to do something that scales for Vermont. And then, if we decide to do something different in a few years, we'll have that debate. But this is a good first step, a voluntary plan, combining the pools of both New Hampshire and Vermont to make it affordable for Vermont and New Hampshire. So I'd also like to see an opportunity to make sure that we transform the good education system we have right now to the very best in the country. This could be one of the best economic development tools we have in the toolbox. In my first term, working with the legislature, we increased investments in early care and learning, K through 12, technical education, and higher education. This year I propose an additional $7 million for child care so that low income and working families can afford a safe place for their kids, giving them a fresh start, a good foundation, plus another $4 million for higher education, help with loans, tuition costs, and associate degree programs. And to help more people with training outside the traditional college track, we've added funding for non-degree programs and adult technical education. My budget makes these investments while making sure state spending isn't growing faster than our economy or wages. Over the last couple of years, we took some important steps to help Vermonters and our businesses in this state. In my first term, we didn't raise a single tax or fee in the general fund. That means we actually help Vermonters keep more of what they earn for the first time in a long time. And we kept residential property tax rates level. So in total, with the hard work of our school boards, we avoided $71 million in projected property tax rate increases. We also eliminated the income tax on Social Security for low and middle income Vermonters. And to further help businesses, unemployment insurance and workers' comp costs have actually decreased, saving employers across Vermont tens of millions of dollars. In fact, workers' comp rates just went down for the third year in a row, meaning Vermont employers will pay about $40 million a year less in workers' comp premiums. This year, my budget is balanced and spends within its means, while taking care of some of our debt and investing in areas that give us the highest returns. To be clear, my budget doesn't contain any increases in broad-based taxes, like the income tax or the sales tax, or the rooms and meals tax, and certainly not the fuel tax. From my perspective, adding taxes will continue to be the last resort. But unfortunately, I'm not the only one who has a say in this. There's another way besides raising taxes. We can make Vermont more affordable and prosperous by getting more taxpayers here. This will bring in more revenue organically. In every corner of our state, there are businesses, large and small, ready to grow. But good jobs go unfilled because we don't have enough people to fill them. I bet there are a few people in here, in this room, in businesses, that are struggling to find employers or employees as well. And we've had some limited success over the last 2 years, but we need to help do more to reach Vermonters and encourage them to move to our state. This year, my budget includes a total of $2.5 million to identify those likely to consider moving to Vermont. Tell them our story, make it easier for them to move here, find a great job, housing, and a community that fits them. In the regions, but it's important that we do that in the regions and job sectors that need them most. And to be honest, that's in every county outside of Chittenden. And last year we saw incredible interest when we launched an initiative proposed by the legislature for a $10,000 incentive to move here. Now, I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but I thought we ought to give it a shot. And to be honest, we did receive a few calls, people that were disgruntled about the $10,000 tax incentive, the moving fee to get here. Maybe some people right here in this room. But when you think about it, the return on investment is great. You think about $10,000, and it was up to $10,000 to help with moving costs. Now, if we could get a remote worker to come to our state and take advantage of this, $10,000 we paid back almost immediately, within 2 years, with property taxes and sales taxes and all the like. We'd pay it back in 2 years. So that's a pretty good return on investment if we can get people here, because we need people here. But we also saw a lot of national attention with this. And we had over 3,000 people inquire about this program alone. We only have enough money, by the way, for about 25, 35 people. But what it has told us is that incentives work. And that's the lesson we should learn. And some people are just looking for a reason to move here. So here's the bottom line. Every new worker we bring here allows a business, a community, and a school to grow. It also brings in more tax revenue. The answer to many of our problems is right in front of our noses. If we want to fund early education or science and technology for kids, we need more taxpayers, not more taxes. Better roads and bridges, more taxpayers. More drug prevention and treatment, more taxpayers. Weatherization, more taxpayers. Each new taxpayer provides a bit of relief to those of us who are already here and allows us to continue funding programs and services that Vermonters need and expect. This is my focus this legislative session, and I think there's a lot of common ground with the legislature. We just might have a different way of getting us there, a different roadmap, so to speak. I truly believe we can have a better, more prosperous Vermont for all. But to do so, we all have to pull in the same direction. So I thank you for coming. Thank you for doing your part. Look forward to the questions later on, and we'll move on to that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Governor. And now I'd like to call upon Representative Mike Marcotte. Mike this year serves as chair of the House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. Mike?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. Governor, thank you for coming up. Bobby just wanted me to let you know that he's sorry he couldn't make it, but he did find 2 replacements, Senator Rodgers and the governor, to come up, and he said it would take 2 to replace them, so he got them. He hopes that you're satisfied with his replacement. Want to thank Irene and all the kids that came up from my school in Coventry. I'm glad to have you here. Irene and I were graduated from Sacred Heart together. I know her well, and I know she's doing a great job with our kids in Coventry. So thank you for coming. And I think that's a challenge to all schools to send some of their students here with a faculty member when we have these breakfasts. I think it's extremely important that our youth understand how our democracy works, how government works, and ask questions and see what's going on in your state and your local government as well. A few things that, especially what the governor touched on with workforce, that's something that my committee dealt with for probably the first 7 or 8 weeks of the session. We took a lot of testimony, and to understand what we need for workforce, it's not just simply bringing people in and trainings, and it's a whole infrastructure of things that we need to do. The governor touched on childhood care. We need to make sure that our workers are able to have their children taken care of and make sure that they're taken care of and educated in a very good manner. We also need to understand that there's issues with housing throughout the state. We don't have good housing stock for people to move into, affordable housing stock. We're not going to be able to get those people to move here. We also have to have good training programs. We have to make sure that our adult tech system is working correctly. And we touched on weatherization. In our economic development, workforce development bill that we passed a couple of weeks ago, there's a section in there on weatherization, but training people for weatherization. We took testimony from many people that said that they don't have enough workers to be able to get the money out that we have for weatherization. So we want to invest in that training, but then to turn around and apply a tax, double the tax on heating fuels, didn't make any sense to me. When we don't have enough workers to deploy the money that we have now, or just barely enough, why would we raise the tax for the money just to sit there? What we need is to get people trained so that then we can get the money out. Don't get me wrong, weatherization is a very good investment. It pays big dividends. But we're also raising the tax to the very people that we want to help, the low income. We're raising the tax on them. That's not right. So we should be making sure that we can deploy the money that we are already putting to these programs before we start raising more dollars to them. We also just passed the paid family leave bill last Friday. I support paid family leave. But when we start at the top of the scale of what we want to achieve, it's not affordable. That's an $80 million payroll tax on employees. $80 million. Do we have that capacity to raise $80 million in the state? If we do, then I think there's other areas that we should be putting that $80 million to. I think more making sure that everyone is covered with health care. There are other areas that we could put the money to. I think that we need to start out small, as the governor has said. We need to start small and work our way up. I learned that a long time ago, and I think the governor learned it too as a legislator, that you can't start at the very top of the chain. You've got to really start at the bottom and work your way up, and it takes patience, and it takes time. But eventually you do get there if it's a worthy cause that you're pushing for. So with that, I'm going to stop. I know there's going to be a lot of questions here for the governor and for Paul and I and John. So I thank you again for coming and appreciate the time. And Governor, I really appreciate you coming to visit us. It's been a long time since we've had a governor here at a legislative breakfast, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And now I'd like to call upon Representative Paul Lefebvre. Paul this year serves as Vice Chair of the House Committee on Natural Resources, Fish, and Wildlife. Paul?
Thanks, Bill. Good to see you this morning, Governor. Good morning. Of the 8 towns I represent, only one is in Orleans County, so I'll be understandably brief. I know there's a lot of questions to be asked, and I don't want to. I want to give the governor the opportunity to talk to you even more. As a member of the Natural Resources Committee, I thought I would mention 3 issues that are now in front of us that we've been working with, and one is we're still taking testimony now on a bill on how best to more or less monitor and test the groundwater in hopes of getting a more advanced warning in terms of what happened in Bennington, and also the issue of leachate coming out of the septic system, the landfill in Coventry. We want to try to define what is the standard we should be using. We are now looking at 20 parts per trillion as far as this chemical known as PAF, P-A-F is its acronym. I don't have enough syllables in my throat to pronounce it, the scientific name, but anyway, it is what is used, for example, to make stickless frying pans. It also is used in firemen's clothing. It's used in so many different manufacturing capacities that it's almost difficult to stop it at its source. So somehow we have to find what happens when it's released. and how basically to minimize that. We're taking testimony again this week on it. I expect the committee will vote on it either the end of the week or the first of next week. And what I hope to attach to this bill is a bill that Representative Marcotte has put forward and requesting the Secretary of A&R and the Agency of Natural Resources to look at other sources for a possible landfill as opposed to continue just with Coventry. We haven't taken any testimony on that yet, but that's basically, I think maybe it might be a way to get the ball rolling. Another issue that I think you folks might be interested in is a bill that would prevent, it's a bill called wanton waste, which is a bill that says no wild animal shall be shot or taken except for the use of its pelt or its meat. Now, I probably had over 200 emails on this bill, both pro and con. And it's it's a very emotional issue for a lot of us who, you know, we haven't seen any evidence that this is happening, but yet there's a strong feeling out there among some that Vermont has to have a law on the books. What's happened now is that bill is now going into a study committee, which will meet over the summer. Representatives from the Sportsmen, representatives from the Humane Society, the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife, Lewis Porter, and a member from our committee will try to see if there's some common ground they can find. And finally, but not least, is Act 250, which is really, as most of you probably realize, is a very difficult bill, 81 pages. It came as a result of an 18-month study, the last which was a summer committee last summer that went all over the state taking testimony. We had questionnaires out, and we're moving at I must say, a glacial pace at trying to come to grips with some of its recommendations. What we did recently, the committee, the issue is whether or not appeals on Act 250 should stay with the environmental court or move on to a citizens panel, or what's called the VERB, the Vermont Environmental Review Board, and they would hear the appeals as opposed to the court. And so we've been trying to fashion a bill that would reflect the recommendation of the commission, but a lot of us, and I'm included, I would rather keep it with the courts. But basically now that has gone over to another committee in the House Judiciary to hear what they have to say. The issues that really concern me up here in terms of Act 250 are logging. I would like to see Act 250 be a little more proactive in terms of giving this industry a better chance at making it go at the marketplace, and I don't know how that will work. That's still, we haven't had any testimony yet on it. And the other one is the trails, simply because our area, especially Essex County, is becoming more and more increasingly dependent on tourism, and we all know what the big business East Burke is doing with its trail rides. And whether or not, how much jurisdiction Act 250 should be allowed to have on these trails. I know the VAST has had a considerable amount of problems with Act 250 in terms of having trails held up. As you know, most of VAST, the trails come to us through the generosity of the property owners, and it's fine until they realize that the Act 250 they might have an Act 250 on their property, which they do not want. They don't want the state involved in their property, and they think it will devalue it. So there's a thorny issue there as well. But anyway, I'll end it there, and if any of you want to talk to me, I'll hang around after the meeting. I'll be glad to answer whatever questions I can. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And now we reach the point in the program where we open the floor to questions for you, the citizens of Orleans County. As indicated earlier, we've got a special order this morning, and that is we're going to recognize 3 members from the Green Team to kick things off. And after the 3 members from the Green Team have made their comments and asked their questions, we ask that you come over to this general area, stand and wait your turn. And usually what happens is we have a whole lot of people that at 8:45 have developed some questions or comments, but at 20 minutes after 8, they don't have any questions. Meaning, if you have something you want to say, make sure that you get up here early. So without any further, I would ask somebody from the Green Team to lead us off.
So, in November, we attended the Youth Environmental Summit in Barrie. We went to presentations that really made us think about the human impact on global warming. We learned that Americans use 100 billion plastic bags a year, and only about 1% of those are recycled. We did research that revealed that there are 5 gyres floating in our oceans. The largest island of floating plastic is 600,000 square miles. The most disturbing thing we learned about was how microplastics are now found in 90% of most of our world's water supply. Microplastics are even in our sea salt. We want something better for our planet. We do not want to be looking at cancer, or even worse, by the time we're 30.
After that day, we decided to take action by asking our local Shaw's store to stop using plastic bags and our Wendy's restaurant to stop using straws. When word got out about our meeting with Shaw's, the Dump organization and the Cottoners donated money so that we could purchase reusable shopping bags to give away at Shaw's. Shaw's matched these donations in reusable bags. We scheduled a time to inform customers about the negative impact of single-use plastics. In less than 2 hours, we gave away over 100 bags, and some of the comments we heard were, "I'm so glad you're doing this."
No thanks, I have plenty of my own bags, but I'm so happy to see you out here.
In Canada, we don't have this problem. Our stores charge 10 cents a bag if we don't bring our own. We are so happy to hear that S-113 has made the initial approval. We like that people will have to pay for their bags. All of us need to be responsible. We support the idea that retailers keep the bag fee money. We know there is much more to do, but we think that this is a great first step. We ask that those representing the state of Vermont continue to keep environmental issues at the top of the list. For our part, we will continue to hold informational sessions and fundraise to be able to give customers a free shopping bag. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And now we'll do the normal order of response by the legislator and the governor. And I'd like to start off by calling upon Governor Scott if he has any comments as to the presentation by the Green Team.
Well, thanks for your interest. I think in Senator Rodgers, you probably responded as the Senate is concerned, but it's passed the Senate. It's over in the House right now, the plastic bag ban. I believe that it'll make it through the House as well, unless someone tells me differently. There was a little bit of a, I wasn't quite sure of why we were charging 10 cents for paper bags to go back to the retailers. That didn't make a lot of sense to me, but I think they cut that back to 5 cents now, and it seems to be a little bit more palatable. But you brought up a lot of issues in terms of climate change, but as well as recycling. We need to do more in that regard and not waste as much as we do, because we're frugal Vermonters, and we should be looking for ways to save money and do for ourselves. And I think that this initiative is probably something that's going to make it through the legislative process as I see it from my vantage point. Maybe somebody else from the House can react to that.
Thank you. Senator Rodgers.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you guys. I did hear from Ms. Digest on the bill, and we did pass it. What it bans is the plastic single-use bags. The reason to go to the 10 cents for the retailer was we thought the retailers should be kept whole, and the cost of a paper bag is usually around 10 or 15 cents, so that would reimburse them for the bag so that they weren't putting it out. We also banned the plastic straws and styrofoam like you get takeout food in. And so I think this is a big step forward. You mentioned microplastics. A lot of people are thinking about and concentrating on the microplastics that are in the water, but we also have a huge problem with microplastics in the soil. all these plastics that people throw out, they might break down and disappear to the naked eye, but those microplastics will last for many, many years. One thing, we had a bunch of school kids come in the committee, and I think the next thing you should look into is these things we all carry in our pockets. They have to mine about 500 pounds of earth to find enough rare earth minerals to make every phone. Plus they're plastic with all kinds of other nasty stuff in them. So it's not just plastics. The way we live our modern life, everything about it has an impact on the earth, and we've got to figure out better ways to move forward. We've only got so much clean soil and so much clean water here, and all life depends on it. So kids are looking into it. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just note the number of people who have lined up already, and would ask both the statement and questioners, as well as the legislators and the governor, to keep your remarks as brief as possible so that we have the opportunity to hear from as many of the folks as possible. The other note that I need to make is that there is a power cord running near the TV camera. And if you're coming from that direction, please make sure not to trip over. It's okay to step on it, but don't trip over it. That's against the rules. Representative Marcotte.
I think the bill is in the House now. It's just come over. I can tell you from my perspective, I own a store. So we don't use plastic, but we do have a number of people that bring plastic bags to us, so it's kind of a recycling effort right now. They're not just single use, so they are being used over and over again. But I do support the banning of plastic. I'm a member of the Vermont Retail and Grocers Association. We support, the association supports the banning of plastic also. So I think it's a good first step. I think I agree with you, and I'm glad you're giving out bags. I think we saw, there was a huge wind event that we had last month that I think we saw pictures in the paper of what it did at the landfill. And the majority of what happened up there was all single-use plastic bags. I want to assure everybody that it was cleaned up the day after those pictures came out. It was cleaned, but that just shows what we have and what's going on is in that plastic, and it blows around. It's hard to contain. So thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for continuing to push for it. I think it's a great cause, and continue your hard work on that. Thank you.
Representative Lefebvre.
Thanks very much for showing up. We all know the future belongs to you. So the use of plastic is a critical issue in the environment. What I can tell you is the recent Senate bill has come to our committee in the House. There's I think there's at least 3 different bills dealing with getting away from the use of one-use plastic bags. It's simply a question in terms of waiting to hear the testimony in terms of whether or not how to best do that, whether we should implement it immediately, phase it in, try to do it through a financial kind of incentive, or not. But I can assure you that if we took a poll today among the 11 members of my committee, certainly the one-use plastic bag is on its way out.
Next, I'd like to remind everyone, when you do come up, please tell us your name and what town you are from. We'll start with Mrs. Marcotte.
Elliot Spates, Marcotte, Derby, Vermont. Approximately 6 weeks ago, we had an apartment that became vacant, and you may all know about this. Upon entering, we immediately called DCF for the 6th time regarding this family. I needed DCF to know what the children were living in just the night before. We had previously provided them with photos, as did other family members, and we have now accounted for over 20 calls that were made regarding this one family. We let DCF know that they would have 3 days to call us back, or we would go ahead and go public. There was obviously not a confidentiality issue here because we knew exactly who lived there, and we weren't asking to talk about the family. They were gone. We solely wanted DCF to see exactly what the children had been living in. With no attempt to come and view the situation or follow up, we went public. WCAX immediately came to town and ran a 6 p.m. news leading story, as well as multiple papers making this their front page news. All of a sudden, there seemed to be scrambling going on by DCF to do right by these children. We have communicated with the Commissioner of DCF, Ken Schatz, and unfortunately his position was, if we would have known. I find that this is the most egregious of statements, and I certainly called him out on that comment. We pointed out the number of calls that were made and of the over 95 photos that were sent in. And his response was, I can't comment on the situation, so I stand by what I said. Let me point out that confidentiality and ignorance of a situation are two very different things. Ken Schatz is doing us no favors by being in charge of the department that is supposed to ensure our children's safety. I do not have the time nor the patience for anyone's posturing. I contend that Ken Schatz has no position as Commissioner of DCF because there is a clear lack of understanding of what the current temperature of DCF is in our state. Once we went public with the information, which we included on social media, I want you to be very aware that this story was shared over 1,500 times with thousands of comments made. I know that your office has received countless phone calls, and I know that our legislators and senators have as well. So first and foremost, all politicians are put there by the people, for the people. It's clear that your constituents are demanding change. We need to work together to come up with legislation and some level of transparency to ensure the safety of our children. Our entire society is falling down a very deep, dark hole, one which we have created, because confidentiality has become more important than transparency and caring for others, and sadly our children are the ones suffering for it. Politics aside, this should be a situation that is absolutely bipartisan. So what I am asking of you today is what is going to be done to fix this and do right by our children, the most vulnerable in our state.
Governor Scott.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. Obviously, we have our most vulnerable are our kids, and we have to do all we can to protect them. This is a situation that shouldn't have happened. But the reality is that the Department of Children and Families is overwhelmed. The opioid epidemic has affected all of us. The incident rate has increased by 4 or 5-fold over the last few years. My budget put in another $3 million for caseworkers because we just simply don't have enough to go around. So I'm acknowledging we have some issues. But I'm asking, we have to fight this on a number of different fronts. The opioid epidemic is one. We've focused on that over the last couple of years. At least we've stopped the bleeding, so to speak. But we have so much further to go. And I would ask that we fund my recommendation of another $3 million for more caseworkers so we can get ahead of this. So we can prevent some of this from happening. Poverty is part of the problem here in Vermont, and what we need to do, again, all the issues that I brought up before, the lack of workforce, the stagnant population. There is no more tax capacity left. So we're going to have to grow our way out of this, and if we want to protect our most vulnerable, which we have an obligation to do, if we want to make Vermont more affordable and we want economic growth, we're going to have to face these challenges together. And again, it's about focusing on economic development so that we can have the means to do everything that we need to do. So again, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll continue to strive to do better.
Senator Rodgers.
I'd first like to thank you for bringing it to everybody's attention, and it was truly disturbing. And I think in light of the many reports and photos that were sent in, somebody's clearly not doing their job, and somebody should clearly lose their job. Whether Ken knew about it or it stopped further down the line, there should be an investigation into it, and that is in and of itself I see as neglect. No child should have to live in a situation like that, and nobody that causes a child to live in that sort of situation should ever be allowed to keep a child again.
Representative Marcotte.
Talia, thank you for bringing this to our attention. It was brought to my attention as Representative Page, I think on March 2nd, maybe, I think when we came back from, when we were going on break, legislative break, town meeting. I was actually had the opportunity to go to the apartment and view it myself, and it was not a good situation. And I contacted governor's office immediately, and they started working on it right away. I have talked with Commissioner Schatz. Representative Page and I had sat down and chatted with him about this, and we kicked around some ideas, and maybe one idea is maybe making landlords as a mandatory reporter, such as we have school teachers and medical people and such. So that's something that we're thinking about. I've also talked to the chair of the Human Services in the House, and continue to work with them, work with the governor's office. There's also a bill that we took up, it's H335, that deals with PTSD or mental health issues with DCF workers. And I think a couple of years ago we made some changes there as far as workers' comp and mental health in workers, and I think they're covered. But one area that I am asking the administration to look at is to make sure that all our workers take a look at all the areas within state government where our workers are put into situations where their mental health could be compromised. And this is one area. And I think, and I'm not making excuses for anybody, and I don't know who the people are, who the caseworkers are, but I think there are times when people either become immune to what they see, or they become overwhelmed. And I think we need to make sure that we have the resources available to them to make sure that we keep their mental health stable, as well as we do on their physical health. So we are looking at what we can do. Unfortunately, it's government, and it doesn't happen at the snap of a finger. But I think you're highlighting the situation will help us push forward to make some changes there, so that we make sure that our children are protected.
Representative Lefebvre.
I really don't have anything to add. I pretty much agree with what's been said so far. I think the governor is right. The way we're going to go at this is through economic development. Mental health is an incredible issue in this state, and we're just starting to get our hands around it. So thanks again for bringing it to our attention.
We have 11 more minutes left, and we have 5 people who would like to speak. So again, I would ask that the governor and the legislators and the person making the comment or asking the question, please keep your remarks as limited and brief as possible. Next.
My name is Patricia Cooper. I live in Brownington. My question is regard to the contractors having to register. When do they need to register? How much is this going to cost? And how many people more at the state level are going to have to be hired to oversee this? I think when you instituted more things for child care, what you found is child care went down the drain. And I'm not saying that kids shouldn't be in good houses, but I think there's ways to deal with contractors other than more bureaucracy.
Does the governor have any comment that he wishes to make?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree too, Pat, and I fought against it as hard as I could. So basically, every contractor, that whether you're carpenter, plumber, or mason, excavator, anybody that works on somebody's house is going to have a contract. If it continues, it passed the Senate, it hasn't passed the House yet. So I'd ask you all to call your House members, and maybe we'll have to ask the governor to veto it, but they're going to add 2 people to the Secretary of State's office just to oversee this, which means they're planning on collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars from Vermont contractors.
Anything, Representative Marcotte?
Just want to say
Okay, come on up.
brief as possible. This started a few years ago. It was in a bill that was in conference committee, in my committee. We had pulled the language out. The Senate had inserted the language to actually do this. We turned it in, we just stripped it out. The next year, they asked for a sunrise review, which is asking the Office of Professional Regulation to take a look at it. This is part of that report. It's coming over to us in a housing bill. That section, there's a requirement for a report back, and a report back comes to my committee. So I don't know, I'm assuming that I will have jurisdiction over that piece. So it may come to my committee, and we will be holding some extensive hearings on it before we even consider it. So I think that's where it sits right now.
Anything, Representative Lefebvre?
No.
Thank you.
My name's Ken Gamble. I'm the governor's appointee to the Governor's Snowmobile Council. I'm also Caledonia County Director for VAST, and I'm also the Caledonia County Trails Club President. I want to be here on Act 250, and I don't want to do away with Act 250. Please understand that, okay? What I want to do away with is Act 250 expanding anymore. If you put Act 250 on private landowners' land that we're letting us use for nothing, they're paying the taxes, they're paying the cleanup fees in the spring and everything, we're not going to have a trail system in the Northeast Kingdom. I represent all of the Northeast Kingdom as the Governor's Snowmobile Council person. And I'm here to tell you, I've talked to a lot of people, they're going to shut their land. They're just not going to let us use it anymore. In East Burke, we have the #1 bicycle trails in the country. This is all of the country. #1 bicycle trails. They're all going to be closed. They bring millions of dollars. VAST brings $550 million a year to the state of Vermont in 4 months, okay? We've been trying to convert the rail trail from St. John Bay to St. Albans for the last 20 years into a 4-season recreational trail. If VAST can bring $550 million in 4 months, what do you think we could bring in 12 months if we could get that converted? Act 250 has held us up for over 20 years. Rail beds are exempt from any regulatory processes. That's a law the federal government made in the 1800s, okay? The other thing is, I'm going to be 75 years old June 11th. So I was here before Act 250 was. Thank you. Act 250, they told us, was not going to affect any structure that was already built. You could not put it on any structure that's already built. They were going to be grandfathered. They decided to change all that. The other thing is, with Act 250 is, any structure that is already existing and you are repairing, Act 250 does not come in, okay? But our lucky lady said, oh no, you've disturbed more than 10 acres of land, and this is why it's in there. Well, if you are exempt from any regulatory process, you're exempt, that's it. I know many people don't understand what the word exempt means, but it means free of. So you're free of Act 250. But she changes the rules as we go along. My daughter runs a business.
We've got to shorten it.
Well, we got it, okay, all right, whatever. Well, anyway, she wants us to take down a sign that's this big, because she says it comes under Act 250. Signs only come under Act 250 when they're bulletin sized and also when they're lighted. Well, I'm sorry.
Senator Rodgers.
This is important for business. We're trying to get business to the state. You know what? That's how you're going to get it, not kicking people out. My daughter's going to lose her job, and that's important to me. I know it isn't to you because you don't care.
Marcotte, anything?
This is what's problem with
One thing that is...
Okay, yes.
You don't care. Yeah. And who set the time limit that you can't speak?
What he is talking about is economic development. Generally, all of the Act 250 goes to Powell's committee, but that's something that I think I'll probably ask to take a look at, ask my committee as possession of that bill, if those things are put in it.
Can I just...
Representative Lefebvre?
I think the governor would like to say a word.
I believe that the trails should be exempt as well. We've been fighting this proposal for a while. I think the Loyal Valley Rail Trail is a prime example of what's not working. We spent millions of dollars trying to get that approved, going through the Act 250 process. and we're using up money that we need for the investment, the capital infrastructure and so forth. So we aren't able to use that. We used it instead in court. So this is an example. There's a couple of bills going through the House and the Senate right now. Our bill is one, I believe, that puts some common sense, takes a common sense approach to Act 250 and actually enhances it and makes it better and more usable. And I believe the other one goes in the opposite direction. So we'll get through this, but I agree with you. And I'll talk to you after about the sign, because I'm not sure what that is, but I'll talk to you about that after.
Well, thank you. I'd just like to apologize.
Representative
to anybody
Lefebvre.
that upset. I'm sorry.
Anything?
Act 250.
Again, you need to come up here.
Act 250 will not be acted on this year by the House. I doubt it. I doubt it will make it to the floor. There's just too many issues now. We now believe it's going to go into next year. And nothing really has been resolved. We've taken testimony, but it's still very much a work in progress. So I pretty much agree with the governor and Kenny in terms of what is happening with VAST, but believe me, Act 250 has not been yet, its powers have not been yet increased.
We do have 2.5 minutes left. I think that means that two folks are going to be disappointed. Mr. Fina?
Thank you, Bill. Good morning again, everyone. Peter Fina from Vermont. I wanted to make a statement and a question. Senator Rodgers, contained in House Bill 541, which I believe is with the Senate Finance Committee. Currently written in there is the way it's worded is that if property transfers via under a legal entity, the ownership of that entity, the property transfer tax would now apply. So that's 1.25% based on the assessed value of that property, land or building. The concern I have with that, and I believe all business owners in the state of Vermont, Governor would have a concern with, is when an LLC, such as Butterworth Farms, say, was to pass ownership because of an individual passing away, and he's passing that business on to his heirs. The way it's written now, there would be a 1.25% transfer tax due from the heirs. I think that really hurts our family farms, our family businesses, you name it. And I wanted to bring that to your attention because it's in the Senate now, and Governor just make that comment to you as well. Thank you, Bill.
Governor Scott?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I understand the particulars of that, but is this a House bill that went over to the Senate?
It is.
Okay, so it's going to be acted on in the Senate at this point. This is a prime example of if you have an issue with a bill, please make the time. I know it's difficult. Come to Montpelier and testify. And I know that sounds daunting at times, but it's about telling your story. And it has a huge effect. We have a lot of lobbyists that come around the buildings and talk about issues, but there's nothing more powerful than you yourselves telling your stories. And so I would just advocate, if you can, and I'm sure you will, but get some people to talk about this, come into the committee and explain to them what effect this would have, or the detrimental effect it would have on businesses.
Senator Rodgers?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for bringing that up, because as you might know, in the Senate we serve on 2 committees, and we really don't have time to focus what's moving in and out of other committees until it's brought to the floor or talked about at a caucus. So it's certainly something I would agree with you on, and we'll certainly look into, but I really don't know that much about it. But it's, as the governor said, it's so important that you folks who are focused in on the things that affect your life, remember, there's thousands of bills introduced every year, and they're in all these different committees, and things are happening, and there's only so much wavelength we have. So please, when you see something that worries you, bring it to our attention. Thank you.
Representative Marcotte, anything? Representative Lefebvre,
No.
anything? Okay. That brings us to conclusion of this morning's legislative breakfast. I'd like to thank Senator Rodgers and Representatives Marcotte and Lefebvre, and a special thanks to Governor Scott and to the Green Team. The next breakfast will be held here on April 29th, at which breakfast our guests are scheduled to be Senator John Rodgers and Representatives Vicki Strong and Brian Smith. Thank you for attending.